Welcome to Not Your Ordinary Parts, a podcast where we talk about hard things associated with the human experience with the goal of increasing awareness, growth, and healing. You may hear information from professionally licensed therapists, life coaches, healers, doctors, etc. This information is not medical advice or therapy and is not meant to replace actual therapy or instructions given by a doctor or personal therapist. I'm your host, Jalan Johnson. My guest today is Dr. Diane Poole Heller. Dr. Heller is a world renowned expert in attachment theory, trauma healing, and relational transformation. Over the past 4 decades, she has been at the forefront of understanding how early attachment experiences shape the way we love, connect, and navigate relationships. And more importantly, how we can heal and rewire these patterns at any stage of life. As an internationally recognized speaker, author, and clinical trainer, Dr. Heller has worked with thousands of therapists and millions of individuals to bridge the gap between trauma, attachment, and the path to secure, fulfilling relationships. She is the creator of Dynamic Attachment Repatterning Experience, an innovative therapeutic model that has transformed the way we approach healing from insecure attachment. Her book, The Power of Attachment, delves into the unseen forces that drive our relationships, revealing why we connect the way we do, why love sometimes feels so out of reach, and most importantly, how we can move toward lasting emotional security. Through her work, Dr. Heller has helped people untangle the unconscious patterns that keep them stuck in cycles of fear, avoidance, and self protection, empowering them to move toward deeper intimacy, trust, and connection. She has spent decades proving that attachment wounds don't have to define us and that healing is always within reach. Whether through her books, her clinical work, or her teachings, Dr. Heller is giving people the tools to break free from the past and rebuild relationships that feel safe, secure, and fulfilling. So, Dr. Heller, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being my guest.
Oh, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you, Jill. I'm really glad we're together doing this today.
Thank you. And also, I gave a bit of a introduction, but so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better, would you mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to who and where you are today, please?
Well, I started out as a child in Pennsylvania, where you are, which is kind of cool. And had a kind of a challenging upbringing. So I think in dealing with that, learning the human journey that a lot of us are on is not so easy sometimes.
Mm,
In the process of trying to heal from that, I learned a lot about trauma and learned a lot about recovery and got help along the way. And then just felt like it was just too gosh darn hard to get through trauma, what was available way back when I was doing this in the early 80s. And I just felt like, geez, it needs to be easier. So I got
mm,
into a kind of a maniacal focus on how do you heal trauma and how do you recover from extreme life events, including violence and other kinds of difficulties. And, um, you know, kind of got on a mission, I guess, to help people recover. And Peter Levine was one of my mentors. He created somatic experiencing. So I got to get treatment from him a lot because we live in the same state at the time. And I also, studied with him and taught with him. I'm still teaching with him. We still teach together, but I was assisting him and teaching a lot with him, uh, helping him a lot with what he was doing, creating his training program, that sort of thing, for about 25 years. And now we were on our own, going on 40 years of, we started teaching together a lot online. So we do that once or twice a year now because I'm really trying to create a really great legacy for him and also just get that work out. And then also my attachment work is my own sort of thing, or in terms of taking a deep dive in that because um, somatic experiencing is great. I think they're a marriage made in heaven, but but it's a lot about regulating the nervous system and very physiological, and it covers a lot of things. It's a huge body of work, and I felt like more needed to be said about relationship because so often people can recover from trauma triggers and difficult symptoms and all of that, but a lot of what remains for a lot of people is difficulty connecting to their real authentic self and also connecting to other people. So one of the psychologists, and I'm trying to remember his first name, his last name is Lipton. It's not Bruce Lipton, it's a different Lipton. He said that the shortest definition for trauma is broken connection. So I'm really trying to help people
mm.
heal connection because it's so important to us as humans.
Wow, thank you for that. And I think when you think about connections, I don't know if a lot of us think about a connection internally or with ourselves.
Mm.
And I think that's a big one that trauma can cause, and it can create that insecurity. So, broken connections with others and ourselves can be building on that definition of trauma.
I think it's been an important focus, and I think it adds to the depth of healing that people are capable of. I think we're designed to heal, and
Hmm.
even with attachment injury or how trauma later even it impacts our ability to connect, like you said, to ourselves and to other people. There is a great potential for healing. So the message has a lot of hope in it, and a lot of practical, experiential kinds of things we can do, and practices we can do, and capacities we can regain if they were disrupted by trauma or attachment injury.
You are well versed in all of this, right? Let's say someone's listening, and maybe for the first time they're hearing about trauma or attachment injuries or somatic this or the nervous system. How would you define trauma and what it does to the body?
Well, you can think of another short definition for trauma is too much, too soon, too fast, right? So now
Mhm.
sometimes things happen too slow, like gas poisoning that you're not aware of is happening. That's happening too slow that your threat response doesn't even go on. But generally speaking, it's too much coming at you that you can't integrate, you can't in a resilient way cope with, like a car speeding at you and you're going to have a car crash or something like that. So, or a violent attack that you aren't strong enough to avoid, something like that. So it's just too much, overwhelming our ability to defend ourselves or protect ourselves or even process the arousal that's coming at us when we're scared, or the stimulus. It's like too much stimulus for your nervous system to manage. And you can think of our nervous system a little bit like our metabolism. You know how like at Thanksgiving or a holiday you overeat maybe, like if you're like me. And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, I clogged up my whole system. I can't even move. I want to go to sleep. I got to walk it off." It's a little bit like that. Our nervous systems are designed to digest stimulus and to manage threat and to manage all these things, but there can be too much, right? So when there's too
Mm,
much, trauma tends to stop time. We tend to get disconnected, like right before the worst moment of something happening or right at the moment something happens. And even if rescue happens the next moment, because we disconnected, we don't see the resolution. So we stay stuck in the anxiety or the dissociation or the disconnection or the anger or whatever might have been going on when we've been trying to confront threat. So it's a physiologically, we tend to not feel safe. Sometimes if it's extreme, we can even feel like an electrical charge in our body, that so our body doesn't feel like a safe place to go. So then we
mm,
become disembodied or disconnected. We don't get our physical cues about things that we need to survive. So it can have a lot of physical aspects to it. If there's too much arousal on the sympathetic nervous system, which is kind of hyper arousal, we can have symptoms of anger outbursts or panic attacks or super fast heart rate or fast thinking, so that we just are kind of out of sync with ourselves. And likewise, if we get too much parasympathetic nervous system activation where it goes past the relaxation response it's designed to do, it can take us into shutdown or dissociation or depression or lethargy or feeling kind of dead or even having digestive problems, because our threat response is designed to be relatively short lived. And when it gets stuck on, then over time, we can have some symptoms that start to show up. So that's an important thing to understand about our body's trying to tell us something, and our body has a
mm,
capacity to heal if we can reduce the arousal and work with it bit by bit and pace it and dose it in a way that we can integrate it and alternate between something that's scary or giving us a lot of anger or fear or whatever, and then alternate that with a resource that helps us, neutralize it a little bit or have a contradictory experience to what was scary, like actually have a need met that wasn't met in the original scenario, or maybe we were alone, but this time we with a therapist or with a friend, or we have somebody with us, so we're not dealing with it alone. A lot of different things can help us mitigate the excess of scariness that happened to us, and we can actually digest it, like, eating your normal 3 meals a day instead of eating all your 3 meals a day at once. Your nervous system can manage it if it's presented in a reasonable amount. And that's a big thing of what we're doing, when we're, working with someone in a session or working with a friend, is try to help reduce it into baby steps or small chunks, so we can actually integrate the experience instead of fragment or disconnect or get emotionally volatile or upset or have, difficult symptoms.
Mm. Thank you so much for that. I want to circle back to something you said because, and I always try to think about the person who's hearing this for the first time, who has no idea that they've even experienced trauma because it's just their normal, right? And they may hear something and go, well, wait, that sounds like something that I feel or something that I experienced, but I wasn't in a plane crash or a bad car accident or something like that. So how is that affecting me? You said we may feel like our body is not a safe place to go.
Mhm.
So where else would we be? Like, how would we break that down to someone who doesn't understand that you may be disembodied or not in your body?
Yeah, it can, like, one symptom of that is accident proneness. Like, you kind of bump into things, your boundaries aren't working, so you kind of know where the door is. Or when you're getting in a car, you hit your head. Like, I've had that happen when I've been, into my trauma experience more than my regular experience. Um, so there can be kind of a clumsiness, or just not, like, even being kind of awkward or uncoordinated. Or another symptom of unresolved trauma is not being able to orient. So, like, I'm
Mm,
very GPS dependent, like getting lost easily, like not being able to, like, figure out, well, where am I, north, south, east, west. There's this disorientation, is another symptom of trauma being in charge instead of your regular, your regular senses about being able to orient in time and space. Or, losing words and losing
mm.
time can be aspects of unresolved trauma too.
I've heard it said that trauma can cause you to live in your head.
Hmm.
And can you explain what because I mean if you're not in your body, then you may be in your head. So
Right.
is if you do feel safety, I've also heard people say you drop down into your body, which that makes sense because you're coming down from your head into your body.
Right. Yeah. So sometimes we can get, one form of disconnection is being largely cognitive, which is nothing wrong with being cognitive, but that you're actually missing all the information, or you're not feeling the
Mhm.
signals that come from your physical sense of yourself. So that limits our safety, really.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. So, I want to talk a little bit more about you before we get into what you do, even though we've already started that a little bit. But before you became the teacher, the expert, and the world-renowned leader in attachment and trauma healing, who were you?
Uh, I was really, like many people in their 20s, I was trying all sorts of different careers. I was everything from a graphic designer to a corporate training manager, of a women's health organization. And I was writing training manuals. I was easy for me to generate, how do you train people to do their job, or train people to how to be with customers, or that sort of thing. So I was into training, and I was very humanistic, but I was in a corporation that was not at all humanistic. They were awful, really. They were based in Philadelphia at the time. And, they tend to use fear motivation all the time. So I was, as a manager,
Mhm.
I was always trying to take their fear motivation and convert it into something humanistic and kind and empowering, and change the message, because I was really into win-win, like trying to make this like safe and fun place to work, instead of like everybody being worried about losing their jobs all the time. And so that was an interesting challenge. And I had to be kind of a hidden humanist, because unless I talked about anything like why not to fire people all the time. I would have to put it in things in a frame of like, well, it's costing the company money to do all this training because they wouldn't respond to the fact that it was just not the right way to treat people. It was just like, so that got old pretty fast, even though I had a high level position. It was like, oh man, I wanted to be in a situation where my values were more reflected. So then, and also my trauma history came up because I had a head on collision and it opened up my own trauma history. So I became, and then I also, before I became a therapist, I studied for 11 years to become a spiritual teacher in the diamond approach. So I have a strong background in that. I'm still doing that work. That I started that in 1979. So that's how old I am. Dinosaur. And so then I really thought when I was doing the spiritual work, which had a psychological and spiritual integration, I got really interested, and my own trauma history, I got really interested in healing. And then I decided to, get the education and become a therapist, get the license and all that good stuff. I have a master's, PhD, all that sort of thing. And then I got really interested in how to work with trauma. So, and then after that, I got really interested in how to work with attachment. So there's all of that background of my explorations prior to being a therapist. Yeah.
What was early life like for you? Like, what was your family system like? What was it like growing up? What was school like?
Oh gosh. Well, I really liked school. I found it a refuge from my family, actually, and it was like easy. I mean, school just told you what to do, like do this, do that, and you did it, and they were like all excited that you did it. That was just super simple for me, and clear, which is not like my family. My family was very confusing and just a lot of you know unsolvable situations that you were thrown as a kid, and also probably some mental illness from my family, certain members of my family, and that resulted in acting out violence and a lot of harsh criticism, that sort of thing. So school for me was great. I was like, I'm out of here.
Mm.
I'm just going to go and teachers like you if you do what they tell you to do. I mean, it's easy to be, liked in school. I mean, because you just do ABC, whatever it is. So I was happy in school, and I also retreated into books a lot. Probably read a book a day. I was crazy. I read almost every book in the junior library in our town because I retreated through books too. I found
Mm.
another life in all these books, and I always hated it when they ended. So I kind of lived through the books, and there were good aspects to my family too. One of the things I'm grateful to my family for is they had really solid values. I mean, just basic good. People don't talk about that anymore, but I'm so grateful that I grew up with just a really good sense of how to be a contributing, reasonably good human being, and what that was about through my church and through my community, and my parents were really good about that. That was something I've always been grateful to them for.
Mm. Were there ever any points where maybe you felt unseen and had to like feel like you had to work for love or to be seen?
Oh, I would say every day. That was a big It
Oh.
wasn't the most loving, contactful environment for me. So I was pretty much my sister had a nickname for me called the zombie kid. So that gives you a sense of how disconnected I was as a kid when I was home, because it wasn't a safe sometimes it was safe, but largely it wasn't safe. So I was just trying not to be a target. So I was like, just got really good at hiding and really good at not saying anything, and, not being seen. Not being seen was safer for me. So being seen, I
Mm.
think, happened more at school, which I think is why I excelled at school, because, I flourished there, but I never talked about it at home. My mom would go to PTA meetings and find out all this stuff about me. Just, why didn't you tell me this? And I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. So I had a double life in a way, when I think about it now when you ask that question. But I managed. I mean, I was really lucky that I had really, for the most part, not every teacher, but a lot of really good teachers. And I got a lot of kudos for reading so much. My vocabulary was like crazy advanced for a little kid because I was reading constantly. And they didn't believe I could read so much. So they'd make me do a book report every day at lunch. But of course, I could do it because I read the book. I mean, it wasn't a big deal, you know? So reading and my dog and my best friend were really, really great resources for me. And the fact that we lived in the mountains, I could get out in nature a lot, and I was so nature really helped too. So and there were certain things my family did. We lived along a river. We used to do water skiing and lots of picnics and things like that. Being outdoors was really a big resource for me.
Mm, yes. Um, how do you think your early life affected your love life once you started dating?
Well, I have a pretty severe trauma history that was even outside my family about being violently attacked as a kid. And so I actually had a pretty healthy fear of men. So I
Mm,
was not comfortable dating in high school. And I didn't know why I was so scared because I had dissociated from it. So later on, when I had a head on collision, it opened up that trauma history and I understood what my symptoms were about. But, so I was always kind of skittish and
mhm,
so I guess I would say I'd have disorganized attachment. It didn't come from it came from this other situation, but I think that definitely had a big impact on my ability to date or feel comfortable with all that. I was friendly and everything, but I was sort of like, I don't know. It seemed dangerous to me because it was dangerous early on. So I think that was a big impact on me till I finally was able to work through it. So
mm. If there was a version of you that you could go back to now before you understood trauma and attachment, who would it be and what would you say to her?
you mean a version of myself? Not a not
Mhm.
okay.
A younger version of yourself.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean,
Like
she was pretty confused, so I don't know. I think, well, I was very artistic and creative, so I would just say that's good. Then you had a lot of really great, intelligent coping strategies, and I'm really glad you eventually got the help you needed to do the healing.
mm, okay, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important that we understand how our early life experience can have an effect on who we become and how we act and what things we do. And I think that that journey shapes us in a way. Um, and I think that probably propelled you into learning about attachment theories.
Hmm.
For those who don't know the science behind attachment or even what attachments or attachment theories are, can you kind of get into that and break it down?
Sure. Attachment theory's been around a long time. John Bowlby made a many people made major contributions, but I like his in particular, along with many others. He really sees attachment as our biological inherent, like we just come with the package, with our bodies. It comes with us as babies, even in utero, that we can recognize. It's like an instinct, like how to be hungry, right? You know how to be thirsty. You don't
Mm,
like question that. It's just part of the package, right? It's part of having a body. Well, he really looked at it, I would say, looked at attachment that way, that it was our instinct to bond to our caregivers because we're dependent as little ones. We don't pop out of the birth canal and are, able to run around and, make money and have a place for ourselves. So we have to have someone that we go to when we're stressed or scared or, for protection, but also for love and nurturing. So I think that is really attachment theory is really like what happens. What's an ideal scenario for connecting and bonding? What's healthy. But this is the thing I want to underscore is we know that. I mean, in your body when somebody is kind versus when they're hateful. I mean, right? But
mm,
as we interact with different caregiving styles, and our parents learn their parenting often from the way they were parented, it's very easily to pass it down in generations. But and I think most parents do the best they can. They sometimes have unresolved trauma that interferes with their ability to be the ideal parent. But a lot of people are listening that are parents. So I just want you to take that burden off your shoulders. You only know what you know when you know it. So you might be learning
exactly.
some things today that you didn't know before, and that's fine. But our whole goal is to move our families and ourselves and our relationships forward in a healthy way. So I think attachment theory is really helpful to identify what is healthy and where some adaptations away from this inherent health that we have for secure attachment that happened to us that kind of interfere or got dumped on top of it or whatever. But if we peel it off and we heal the disruptions, we come back to our basic nature, which is love. We come back to our basic capacity for love. We have that. It's not like something you have to make
Mhm.
or create. It's there. It just might be severely disrupted. And that's what I've dedicated my work to, is to try to figure out, okay, it's great to know the theory and all this stuff about it, but what do you do with it? Like, how do you move from insecure attachment to secure attachment? How do you move from the suffering and the woundedness back to wellness, And that's what I'm trying to really reinforce for people. And it's very, very possible to do that. It's possible to learn or earn secure attachment if you didn't start out with it. A lot of us didn't start out with it, probably 50%
Yeah.
of the population. I don't know. There's always research on that and the statistics change. But, you know, it's not a small thing to heal your attachment history, but it can be done. And we are able to heal. The reason I'm stressing that is there's books written out there that say if you didn't have good support or nurturing in certain developmental stages as a kid, you will never have it. And I disagree with that. So I just want to say I think there's a lot of the attachment system can be very forgiving and can heal quite a bit. Maybe not 100%, but it can do a significant shift back to secure attachment from attachment injury.
I'm glad you added that part. So are there different types of attachment styles, and do they show up differently in relationship?
Yeah, they show up quite differently. I can try. It's not easy to do this briefly, but I can try to give you an overview, and you're welcome to interject any comments along the way. Secure attachment is what we're trying to get back to. Some people were born in pro-social families where people were really attuned to you and really reflected your emotions accurately and really helped you feel safe and had time to be playful and were trustworthy and reliable and consistent and all of that good stuff. Affectionate in an appropriate way. Were able to repair when something went off the rails. They could, apologize, or they could, help you find a better way, and good at problem solving, good at all those yummy things. That's
Mhm.
very, very helpful to start out with that. And in fact, if you have started with secure attachment or you've learned it later, it gives you kind of a shield from getting post-traumatic stress disorder. There's research that shows that it really mitigates any post-traumatic stress related to whatever happens to you later in life. So it's important to get back there, whether you do it later or you had it in the beginning. It makes a really big difference. Like, they have research that soldiers coming back from war, and they've all been exposed to the same horrific circumstances sometimes, that those that have secure backgrounds don't get nearly as symptomatic, or they recover very quickly, in contrast to people that had attachment injury. They might go into post-traumatic stress disorder, which is really not a
Oh,
disorder. It's a normal
that's
response to overwhelms.
incredible. Mm.
So that's secure. And then avoidant attachment, these are not sequential. I have to give them to you in a certain order, but they all happen at the same time in utero and right after birth. Like, an infant is absorbing like a sponge the relationships between themselves and caregivers, and also the relations even between the caregivers, moms and dads, or moms and moms, or dads, or grandma and mom, or whoever is in that primary attachment role. The way they relate to the child, but even the way they relate to each other, is very impacting the relational blueprint the child is developing unconsciously, and really in an embodied kind of way, because they don't even have an ego structure yet to tell a story about mom does this, dad does that. That's not happening yet. So it's even pre-verbal. A lot of what's happening is pre-verbal. So it's often not conscious yet, which is why when we understand it better, more compassionately and with curiosity instead of judgment, we don't take things so personally, or we see our partner later on as an adult, like, oh, okay, we might even be able to identify their attachment style, but we don't use that as a label, like, oh, you're just being so avoidant. You
Mhm.
understand the wound behind it, and that it's not about you, even though you're at the brunt of it because you're in the relationship with that person. It's most likely coming from their attachment history, and it takes a lot of that, taking it personally, out of the reactivity of adult relationship, which is huge. That's a really big shift. So I love the fact that it opens the door for compassion and healing, and also lessens the tendency to judge or be critical or see people harshly because we don't understand what probably happened to them that put them in a certain attachment focus or adaptation. So with the avoidance style, usually now things can happen beyond parenting. Like you can have like maybe a baby's born and there's a difficult birth and the mother has to be in the hospital and the baby has to be separated from the mom for medical reasons, or vice versa. The baby is premature and has to be separated. There's all sorts of different things that can happen medically. You can be born in a war zone. You can be born during a famine. You can be born, in a marginalized community where there's all sorts of microaggressions that are happening. So there's more to it than just moms and dads and dads and dads and moms, or however that configuration is. But for the time we have, I'm going to focus mostly on caregiving because a child has to adapt to the capacities, but also the deficiencies of their caregiver to survive. They have to match it. And that's why they will adapt away from secure attachment if the parent is not presencing secure attachment. So the way that happens for the avoidant is the parent is usually like babies are very active. They're trying to engage with you. They're looking cute. They're looking at you. They're grabbing your hair. They're gurgling or cooing or whatever they're doing, or maybe crying, but they're trying to connect. They're not, like they used to say, blank slates. That is not at all what's going on. Children are blank slates. So if you're reaching out for connection, which you need to survive, it's not just a luxury item, and your parent is like nobody's home, nobody's present, nobody's there, that's terrifying to an infant because they need you, then they need you to respond. So a parent might be dealing with unresolved trauma and they're dissociated. They can't maybe even help that, but it's going to be a problem for the kid. So the kid will start to feel like they have to do it all themselves, which of course as an infant you can't do, but they'll feel like connecting is not working. I'm just going to shut down my attachment system because this isn't happening. It's not nourishing. Or the parent can be actively rejecting. So there can be severe neglect or reject. Neglect or reject is kind of what happens for avoidant. And it could be that the parent is angry a lot or just looks at the kid with hatred, or they, have a lot of contempt when they're changing the diapers, because I don't know, it smells bad, whatever. But it's too often and it actually becomes a pattern. If it happens once or twice, not a big deal. But if it happens repetitively, that's a problem. The third way avoidant adaptation will set up is if a parent actually shows up, but they only teaching the child tasks and left brain activities like how to read, how to write, how to ride a bike, how to talk different languages. I mean, whatever that is. But they're not emotionally engaged. They're not right brain to right brain. They're just left brain to left brain. So the result of that is that kids that grow up with avoidant, the superpower they usually have is they're incredibly productive. They don't get sidetracked by other people's emotions or other people's needs. They're pretty self-sufficient. They get the job done. The culture loves that. So, but we want it, from my perspective, we want them to have that productivity. Yay, great. But also be able to have the capacity for intimate relationships and to be nourished emotionally and, be able to show up connected to themselves and connected to others. So we're just trying to repair that part, because very often when there's been a parents that have, been disconnected emotionally or, really don't honor the child's needs. The child grows up not feeling their needs, not identifying their needs, or just disowning most of their emotions, just kind of shoving that aside. And they literally put the brakes on their natural inherent instinct to bond. And they tend to knee-jerk isolate and do things alone and, have a better relationship with their computer or their iPhone than they do with a person, or the better relationship with animals instead of people. So, and that may not mean that they might still have friends and stuff, but it's hard for them to hit a certain level of intimacy. Intimacy can feel really challenging because of the original imprint didn't bode well for that to feel safe. So a lot of times if an avoidant gets really close and they have a wonderful evening, you have a wonderful evening with them, probably the next thing that's going to happen is ghosting, because they'll like, oh, that was great. And now like, oh my God, that happened, so they kind of disappear. But if you understand that, you understand your partner has that issue, you can say, oh my gosh, I really enjoyed tonight. I know we both had this really incredible intimacy. I really loved it. And I know you might need to take some space now. And it's okay. I'm still here. Instead of taking it personally, like this person's rejecting me. How could we have this closeness? And now I can't even get them to answer a text. You need to understand the dynamic. Just say that might have been a lot. That might have felt like overload. And Sheldon on Big Bang Theory. I don't know if anybody watches that show. It's an old show. He kind of is like that, they have like this, I think they have intimacy with each other. They've been dating 5 years only on their birthdays or something. I mean, so it's kind of a little bit of it in that territory, although that's like, comic, sitcom, but he's probably a good somewhat of a representative of that dynamic. Yeah. So that's what I would say about avoid, and I'll give you a chance to say something before I go on to the two other attachment styles.
I was just thinking that that has got to be difficult, even if you understand, okay, I just had an amazing evening with my partner, if you're dating or what have you, and then they disappear. Like, it's got to be difficult not to take that personally or to feel
Absolutely.
like I did something wrong or this person doesn't like me or that they really have a good time, especially if you come from a secure attachment, which understanding an insecure attachment or an avoidant attachment has got to be like, you know, 2 plus 2 equals 94 or something.
Yeah. Well, another part of that, because it does affect us in our adult relationships a lot. Avoidance, because they go so deep into self and they don't really connect to others so much. So they're very self, because when they tried to connect to other, we got to look at this compassionately. The parent was either rejecting in a really horrible way, or they were neglecting them in a really horrible way. They just weren't present. So they have that history. They don't think of relationships as particularly nourishing. Now you can have a little bit of this, or you can have a lot of this, right? You can have a range. And most of us have a mix of attachment styles anyway. But like, if your partner tends to do a lot of deep dive into themselves, like scuba diving into aloneness, right?
Mm,
Like, if you scuba dive, if you come up too fast, you get the bends, right? So if you understand your partner, if they're avoidant, they really need time to shift from aloneness to connection. And ambivalent, I'm going to talk about next, is really big into connection, but they get really concerned about aloneness. So that's the opposite dynamic. But for instance, if I'm inviting my avoidant partner, I don't know, to an amusement park or something I know they love to do, whatever it is, and I say, "Hey, honey, let's go. It's your birthday. I want to take you to the amusement park or the water park or whatever that you love to do, or I want to go hiking or whatever it is." And they're deep in their computer, do video games or research or porn or whatever they're doing on their own, right? They're going to have a hard time surfacing, and that they will feel interrupted, and it will feel uncomfortable to them. So they might give you, I mean, here you are inviting them out for their birthday. They might give you a very abrupt, brusque response. Hey, I'm in the middle of something, instead of saying, "Oh, thanks, honey." I'm in the middle of something, and that's going to hurt. That's going to be like, "Well, shoot, I was just trying to, give you a gift." If you understand, what you would say instead is, "Honey, I want to take you to your favorite whatever, and I know you need some time. So how much time do you think you need to surface before I circle back and we can go?" And then they say, "Oh, I need 20 minutes. Great. Okay. Come back in 20 minutes. It's going to be fine." You gave them time, right? And if you don't understand they need the time, you're going to be all upset that they act kind of pissy when you interrupt them. That's very common dynamic. Now, here's the thing. If you're walking out the door with that person and the phone rings and you take the call, you're disrupting the connection, and they will probably revert to aloneness. So then you're going to have to do it all over again. So you need
wow.
to, once you're present, you need to stay present with them to keep them connected. So there's, like, if you understand these things and you don't think, okay, there's something wrong with them, you don't look at it like that. You go, okay, there's certain things I can do that makes this easier for both of us. And then if they're willing to learn what your things are, like, you need reassurance, you need them to text you when they're on a business trip and you know they got there safely, and you need certain things, and you're willing to accommodate each other related to your attachment wounds, that's helpful. And you don't have to accommodate forever. I mean, we do have to stay tethered and nourish each other, but as you accommodate these wounds, they will start to heal, and people will start to move the meter towards secure attachment. And then there's more confidence, there's more relaxation, there's more comfort with being together and comfort with being alone. All of that starts to sort itself out. And usually, if someone is in with themselves, they have learned or earned or started out with secure attachment. If their partner is a bit in the insecure category, the research shows that it takes about a year to 2 years for them to move to secure, because if you're secure, they're always getting secure responses, even when they're doing something that comes from attachment injury. And that eventually will impact them in a deep way. It's not your responsibility, though, to be somebody's therapist or to try to heal their wounds. They have to buy in. They have to like do some of their own work. You can't do somebody else's homework. You can make it easier for them, but ideally both partners want to move towards secure attachment, and that then a lot can happen. But if one person is just not interested and wants to continue the same behavior that's really painful, that may not be such a great recipe for a good situation.
Your example of scuba diving and coming up too soon, that is so good because I mean, it makes it so clear that this person, if they rush up, they're gonna get sick.
Hmm.
They're gonna get the
They're going to get
bends.
angry, usually irritable.
Yeah, and if you apply that to a person's attachment style or their need to have space or time to process, it would make it so much easier. I mean,
Yeah,
it would make it so much more understandable. It may not make it that much easier right away, but once you understand, then the ease may come shortly thereafter.
exactly. Another example of that is avoidants tend to not be so comfortable with emotions because their parents didn't reflect emotion accurately. Like, you have a parent that smiles over anger, so it's confusing to the kid because the parent's smiling, but you've had people in your life like this, right? They have these very calm voices like this, but you can just feel the rage underneath. And you're like,
Mhm.
oh boy, this person's like a volcano waiting to erupt. And even though they're sounding really okay, sounding almost hypnotically calm, not a good thing, right? And when kids are exposed to that, which of course sometimes they are, that's really confusing emotionally when they're trying to understand emotion. But like, if a parent reflects emotion accurately, oh, honey, I just heard that your schoolmate call you a terrible name, or I just saw that kid push you over on the playground. I'm so sorry. I can see you're really hurt and you're really sad, and you don't know, we have to figure out what's going on there, and work with it or something. You're empathetic, and you're reflecting an accurate emotional response back to the child. Then they feel like, oh, okay, I can feel this, and I'm seen, and people get it, and I'm understood, and I feel an attunement, right? Very different than, oh, it's no big deal, just toughen up, and hit the kid harder than they hit you, or something harsh. That's not going to develop a healthy range of emotional expression, right? So sometimes what will show up in an adult relationship, because avoidance then sometimes just disconnect emotionally. They just don't do it. They're not making a decision not to feel. They just have learned to shut it down so they don't have access to their emotional range. So we're trying to bring that back on board. But what it might look like in a relationship is, like, let's say your, I don't know, your dog just passed away. I hate to say that, but something
Mm.
hard happened, and you're crying, and your avoidant partner's just kind of looking at you, and they're like, well, I don't know why you're so emotional, we can get another dog. Something like that is not going to feel good, right? Or you
No.
see that your emotion, you're having your normal emotional response to that, is overwhelming your partner because they don't know what to do with it. You can, if you have the presence of mind to say, you can say, honey, I really need your support here. I need you to hold me. I need you to console me, but I can see you're overloaded. Why don't you take a break, walk, you know, just go outside and be in nature for 15, whatever time you need, and then come back. And then I really need you to show up for me emotionally. If you honor the fact that they might need a break because emotion's really hard for them, they will probably come back and be able to be a lot more supportive because they feel understood and attuned to,
Mm.
right? And you're not going to know to do that if you don't understand the attachment style, right? You're going to feel like, I can't believe this person's being so cold, and I'm dealing with this grief, and they're just not even there. You're going to have a strong reaction to that, understandably, right? And also, if the avoidant understands you, they're going to say, I can see this is really emotionally devastating, and I'm really sorry that happened. And you know what? I want to be there for you. I just feel like I need a 10-minute break. I haven't had lunch yet, and I can tell I'm thinking more about food. I'm not there with you. Just I'll be back, and I'll be there. I'll do what I can to be there. There's ways you can talk to each other that understand your different situations compassionately and kindly, um, that really make a relationship much safer for both people.
It's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking about the different love languages, but this could also be connection languages or
Yeah.
attachment languages.
Right. Learning to
Yeah.
speak all different of the four attachment languages is really important. It can help
Mhm.
a lot if you understand, because and also you don't take people's behavior so personally. Like if I know somebody
Right.
needs time to surface and I forget to give them the time and they get abrupt with me, I can go, you know what? I didn't give you time. You need some time. So just tell me when's a good time for me to circle back. And you don't have to go like, oh my God, the person's a jerk. They're being really creepy or what. You don't have to go through all that. You can eliminate
Right.
a lot of suffering.
Mhm. We got we can co-author a book, The Attachment Languages.
Yeah, yeah. No, I teach a whole class on that. I've got a lot of material on that actually. A good book to It would be a good book to have more explicit. That's true.
Okay, what was the next one?
The ambivalent attachment is a different scenario. The avoidant attachment shuts their attachment system down. And these are all happening for survival reasons, not because the person's making a decision to do that. It's unconscious.
Mhm.
Um,
Can you
the
say that again?
It's
Just to
unconscious. It's not somebody making a cognitive decision. Okay, I'm not going to cue for attachment. I'm not going to reach out. I'm not going to. You just it's in your body the way you tried to survive your early circumstances. So you have these sort of projections. We all do this. Every human does this. We project our past onto our present and onto our future. So we think we're going to see more of the same. I mean, you just
Mm,
basically feel like you're going to wake up in the living room of mom and dad, you know? So
mhm,
whatever those dynamics were. Um, so with ambivalent, they actually had really good parenting experiences. Like they actually know what healthy attachment feels like, but their parents were really inconsistent. So it was on again, off again. Like they'd feel like, oh, I can relax into this yummy relational field. And then boom, I feel dropped emotionally or dropped physically or dropped spiritually. Just something happens in the parent that they can't stabilize. They can't consistently keep that going. Probably because inside they're getting triggered into their own attachment injuries, probably what's happening. So there's this on again, off again. And so what happens over time when that's repeated over and over and over again, then a child's like going, I don't know. I mean, they're loving now, but what's going to happen in 10 minutes? Or when is the shoe going to drop? Or when am I going to get abandoned? And so they get really
mhm,
focused on the abandonment that's coming. They can't even really enjoy the yummy stuff that's there because they're just waiting for the bad things. So they can't. So because they are sure over time, because it's been a pattern, right? If you have a little bit of this, you expect disappointment. If you have a lot of this dynamic in your history, you'll tend to get angry. You'll pick fights with the person because you're so sure your adult partner is going to ditch you somehow. They're going to leave you somehow. So you're mad at them before they even do anything. They don't have any intention of leaving you at all, but you already decided they're going to do it. So you're just angry to begin with. So,
mm,
um, what we have to do in healing that is understand that we can have and take in caring behaviors, and it doesn't automatically follow that something bad happens today, now in our relationships, right? And that's hard for people that have ambivalent because they tend to feel like they don't have an issue. It's their partner that's doing everything wrong that's causing them distress. That's how they internalize it because they're very other focused. The avoidant is very self focused and not other focused, and the ambivalent is very other focused and not self focused. So part of what they need to learn is how to be authentically self focused. But so one of the things I do for folks is I had a woman that in Germany that I worked with a long time ago, but it was such a great example. She came in, she goes, "Oh, my boyfriend, he's never available. I keep picking the wrong men. They're always unavailable. I'm usually with him for 2 years and then I break up and I'm ready to break up with this guy because he travels for work. He's never around." And I'm like going, oh my gosh. And then I interview her a little bit about her history and it's glaringly ambivalent attachment history. And so I say to her, well, you've been with this guy for 2 years. Isn't there anything there has to be something he's done that's been kind or helpful or supportive? And she's like, no, he's out of town. He's never here. I said, no, come on. Really? There has to be something because they tend to dismiss caring behaviors. They don't see them. So I'm just kind of holding her foot to the fire. And she's getting a little irritated at me, actually annoyed. And I said, come on, there must be something that he did. She just goes, well, He calls me every night when he's on the road and sees how my day went, and he checks in with me, and that, yeah. Well, that's kind of nice. She goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, well, was there anything else? And she goes, uh, well, he travels a lot. So when he is in town, he usually takes me away for a really cool weekend for 3 or 4 days to someplace special because he's gone so much. And I'm like, well, that's kind of nice. And she goes, yeah, she's kind of surprising herself because she hasn't given
Wow.
any thought to this. She's dismissed it all. And she goes, yeah, that is kind of nice. And the other thing he does when he's traveling, he buys me these like special gifts, and they're usually stuff I really like. So he kind of must pay attention to what I like. He must know me, like what I like, because he gives me things I really, really cherish. I'm like, well, yeah, that's pretty nice. And so, we go on and on, right? So and she's shocking herself. She's like, I didn't realize he was doing all that. And I'm like, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And so I said, well, let's try something else. I want you to imagine there's a table full of all the kind of things you want in your relationship, affirming words like the love languages, the form of words, acts of service, kind, safe touch. I mean, and anything you would want in your relationship, just pile it up in front of you, like on this imaginary table. And she goes, okay. And I said, so now I want you to take it in. And she tries to take it. She goes, oh my God, my whole body contracted. And I go, yeah, isn't that interesting? And she goes, I can't take it in because see, a person needs to understand they have a trouble receiving,
Mhm.
not that the other person's doing everything wrong. I mean, they might be making some mistakes as a partner. Nobody's perfect, but that's a dynamic. So I said, well, let's see what happens if you just take in 1% or one atom or one, quark or something. And she goes, oh, I can do that. And my stomach relaxes. And I said, and nothing bad is happening because I'm trying to separate that good things happen and then bad things happen. And nothing bad's happening right now. She goes, yeah, that's true. Because I can take in, oh, I feel fulfilled. Oh, my stomach, I feel really, ooh, it feels really good. And because I want more. I'm like, great. Well, how much do you want? And she goes, 4%. I go, yeah, let's go to 4%. So she keeps upping it, 10, 20, 30. And I think by the end of the session, we can maybe get to 40% or something. And she's able to stay in the fulfillment and satisfaction is really the antidote for the ambivalently attached because they never get the fulfillment, which is why they keep pressuring their partner and they keep making demands and they sometimes a lot of complaints because they don't realize that no matter what their partner does, they don't receive. They can't take it in.
Mhm.
So if you can't take it in, no matter how much people do right, it's not going to feel good, right? So
Right.
he realizes she's got to practice receiving. And when we go back to all the things he was doing, like calling her at night, the special trips, the really relevant gifts, she could take it in and start to actually feel and appreciate him and appreciate the love she actually had in her life. So at the end of the session, she goes, oh my God, my boyfriend's gonna be so glad I did this session with you. And I'm like, yeah, I
Mhm.
can imagine you're ready to break up with him at the beginning of the session. Now you're just ready to go home and love on him a lot, And she goes, yeah, I've got to keep her. I'm like, I think you do too. So that's why you're understanding your attachment system compassionately and with kindness and self-care, that you can let go of some of your, self-sabotaging things like not seeing caring behaviors and not being able to receive, but then blaming the other persons they didn't do it right. And that's why you can't receive. It's really probably because the way your attachment system set up for survival reasons blocked your receiving or made it really difficult. So, I mean, I had this happen in my own life. When I was married, my husband would say to me, he goes, I love you so much. And when I say that, or when I, do something affectionate, or I do something like make dinner, you just, it kind of runs off you like, water up a roof or something, or water through a sieve. And I was like, at first I got really angry. I tell the story a lot because it's so relevant. I was like, I do. Well, that's a terrible thing to say. I do not, because it really hurts me that you can't receive my love. And I was like, in the middle of the night, I woke up and I'm like, oh my goodness, I do that. I deflect.
Mm.
I do. Then I realized how much I was hurting him by not taking his love in. And I realized I didn't come from a very loving environment, so I didn't know what to do with it.
Mhm.
It made me uncomfortable. I didn't know how to receive. So I made a practice for myself that I would show up and stay present whenever anybody, and especially my partner, would do something kind or loving. And that was very hard in the beginning, as that
Mhm.
sounds crazy. Like, why would it be hard to receive love? Well, it can be very hard. And now it's easy, right? But I probably had to really focus on that for 6 months to a year to not deflect. I could feel the impulse to deflect because it made me uncomfortable. And then I'm going, okay, be uncomfortable, but then you get to be loved. This is a good trade-off. So it's just understand these. When I explain this stuff, it's not like rocket science, right? I mean, you get it. I mean, people get it. They immediately go, oh yeah, okay, that's hard, but I can do that. Like an avoidant can practice approach. They hate approach because they're very uncomfortable with connection sometimes. So you can say, okay, just see what happens if you go up to one of your friends at work and you ask them for their, I don't know, just ask them to lunch, or just something that's manageable for you, but you initiate connection. And that's going to be very uncomfortable in the beginning. I had a friend I met at an art studio, an art fair kind of thing. And she's a very talented artist. And I'm an artist too. I love that. I do a lot of art. And so I invited her to come over for brunch. And then the next year she said to me, you don't know how hard that was for me to do. I was so uncomfortable going to your place I really enjoyed myself, but it was so hard for me to show up. Now I understand that she's avoidantly. I get it. I totally get it. And she goes, but you know what? I've worked through that. And now I really want to be with people and I want to do things. So let's go to the movies together. I'm like, she invited me to the movies after she'd been so devastated that I invited her to brunch. So it can change. That's the thing. We can heal, but we have to be willing to go through some of the discomfort of the transformational process, but
Mm.
but the benefits of moving more towards secure are huge. It's a gift that keeps on giving the rest of your life. So it's worth it, in my opinion.
I mean, just the example you gave about the client that you're working with, she had all these things she was getting, and once she put them on the table, she was able to realize, well, man, I do have a lot. He has a lot to offer, but it was just she wasn't able to receive it. And then hearing you make the suggestion about asking one of your coworkers after lunch, I got uncomfortable just thinking about
Think about it.
that.
Yeah. And so it does require, unfortunately, to get a little bit out of your comfort zone. But just like
Yeah, it
my
does.
friend Joni, she some big thing happened because she was uncomfortable at the brunch, but then she was inviting me to the movies. Went to the movies, we had a great time. Went to lunch after that too. So it's just the payoff is so big. But it is true. Getting out of your comfort zone seems to be part of the requirement to get
Yeah,
there.
but getting out of there is where the magic happens. So it's for sure worth it. So,
Right, right. And then just the
all right. So
lastly, briefly, disorganized attachment is the most
yes.
complicated because it has trauma mixed in with the attachment system. So the attachment system is trying to connect, and the trauma is perceiving everything as dangerous, so it doesn't allow the connection. So you kind of have to separate, just like with the ambivalent, you separate, yummy connection, and then this is going to be dropped energetically somehow. In disorganized attachment, there was so much fear or chaos or growing up with addiction or a lot of anger or a lot of violence or whatever, or abuse in the worst case scenarios, that you hit a certain level of intimacy and all the red flags go up, like it's danger, danger, danger. Will Robertson, it's like, don't go, even though you cognitively know your partner's a safe person, everything in you's telling you that the relationship is dangerous. And that's confusing to the partner and confusing to you. And if you understand that you have some unresolved trauma, to untangle from the attachment system, to work with the trauma separately, and then give the attachment system a safe place to land. There's all sorts of interventions we do for that. Um, then you can feel safer in a relational context. But there can be a lot of dysregulation with disorganized attachment because of the unresolved threat. And so learning to co-regulate with your partner or with other friends and learn how to self-regulate really helps you, build relational resiliency.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing, especially the way I mean, it sounds like we're talking about a ball game or something, and you're explaining these complex things, the nervous system and the brain and attachment. So I'm grateful to have you, and I'm grateful for the work that you've done. Um, let's say somebody's listening and they go, "Man, like I have attachment issues,"
Mm.
and they want to figure out what to do next. What is the first step for someone who is new to all this, but recognizing that it is something that they struggle with?
Well, fortunately, back when I started doing all of this, gosh, must have been early 90s or mid 90s. Um, there was hardly anything written about practicalities, like what you can actually functionally practice or what to look for and that sort of thing. So, I mean, my book, Power of Attachment, is a good resource. I have lots of experiential exercises in there, not to promote my own book. There's also a book called Attached by Amir Levine has a lot of ways to recognize different patterns and, what happens in dating and what happens in different combinations. If you have an ambivalent person with an avoidant person, I also have that a little bit in my writing too. I mean, if somebody's really interested, we have all sorts of courses for the public. The Intro to Attachment Styles is, on our website, Trauma Solutions. We have a whole for the public thing on shame, because shame's really debilitating and it infiltrates into our relationships a lot in a not a good way. And we're just putting more and more things together for the public on that. And then for professionals, I mean, people from the public can take these courses too, but we have ones that are oriented to therapists, attachment mastery program, the dynamic attachment repatterning experiences. That we have a lot of programming for professionals. And we also, my commitment is to shine light on anybody that's doing great work and doing wonderful healing work. So I collaborate with many other people in the field, and I produce their courses, or I co-teach with them, or I kind of do the Oprah role where I'm amplifying what I think their gems are and their approach. There's a lot of really good information out there, and fortunately, trauma and attachments become much more accessible with courses and people talking about it. And it's, it used to be, I mean, back when I started, there was this idea that the body and the mind were completely separate. And if you said that there was a body mind integration, they thought you were crazy, so, we've come a long way. And there's a lot more resources. I mean, we try to give, and we have the free attachment quiz if you want to get a little more sense of what's going on with your attachment history. It's free. It's on traumasolutions.com, or my name, DianePooleHeller.com, goes to the same place. And you can take that as much as you want. I just recommend that you take it focused on one relationship at a time, like your mother, your father, your partner, your kid, your coworker, your friend. Take it just thinking about one person, because you start thinking about the dynamics in too many different relationships, it just won't be very accurate. And also, if you take it thinking about yourself, not on your best day, like when you're tired or maybe a little sick, it'll give you a better reading on what your default attachment system might be. And very often you get kind of a pie chart, it's a mix of attachment styles, it's based on your answers. So, it'll give you some feedback. Plus, then we give you some little ebooks and things based on the different attachment styles. So we try to give you a lot of info. We're trying to get the information out there so people can have more compassionate and easier ways to connect with each other. So those are resources. If that's helpful, you're welcome to partake of them.
Very helpful. All right, so let's say if you could sit down with someone who is terrified of love, someone who's been hurt and doesn't believe real connection is possible, they come to you and they just lay it all out on the line. What do you say to them?
Well, first, I would give them big kudos for showing up in my Zoom or my office, because they're reaching out. And so some part of them wants to understand and open up. And I would acknowledge how difficult that can be, especially if you came from circumstances that were really challenging and difficult. And I might interview them, or whatever they're willing to tell me about what happened early on. And basically, as a human, I'm trying, I mean, this is true for all my relationships, but especially when I'm doing something like therapy or trying to interact with someone that's wounded, I'm trying to presence secure attachment the best I can do that, as a person, and create a safe relational field. And just for them, to experience that somebody can have empathy, somebody can be attuned, somebody can understand. And as they're describing their history, because I know the languages of all four attachment styles, I can say, well, it just sounds like, wow, there just wasn't safety in this situation, or there just was nobody that listened to you. You didn't have access to anybody who really felt that you felt like you could lean into or feel supported by. And then I might do some things like, how is it to feel that here? Or if you were to design your own ideal mothering presence in a person, what qualities would that person have? Or have you ever seen anybody in a movie or in a book, read about somebody in a book that you felt they kind of understood, or they were an antidote, or they represented something that was much more nourishing than what you actually grew up with? I would start to poke around to see if we could access some resources that they can relate to personally. Or maybe they just love being in nature and maybe they hug trees. I'll start there, or they have a
Mhm.
really strong relationship with their animals. I go, yeah. And so it's wonderful. You have this really great relationship with your dog, your cat, your llama, your horse, whatever it is. and maybe at some point it'll be okay to open to a human, let's just consider that possibility. Like, oh no, that got too much, like, okay, so there was something in your that made it seem really dangerous, like relationships are really dangerous. So taking curiosity and caring and understanding and trying to resonate with what the person's circumstances are can be really, really helpful. And then I might interview, like a little bit like what you did today, like, when you were emotionally hurt or physically wounded as a child, who did you run to and what did they do? How did they respond? Or, when you had something to celebrate, who did you tell? You can start to see where there might be some pockets of positivity, and there might be, or at least more awareness of where the wounds are, and to reflect that and say that, I mean, in an ideal world, your parent would have responded like this. And then you say what that would be and say, these are my words. Maybe you have words that you like better that your parent would say. So tell me what that would be. You start to explore secure attachment. There's something new that I'm doing a lot of these days is intergenerational trauma. It's probably my next book. And it's going up a generation and saying, your mother or your father really well. And I'm just wanting this. I can't do this with everybody. This is not an exercise for everyone, because you have to sort of be in a certain stage to be able to do this. But I'll usually work with their attachment injury. And then I'll say, I just wonder what you think, for your parent to be that cruel or that consistently mean and demeaning, something must have gone terribly wrong upline. And I just wonder if you focus in on your, let's say, I don't know, dad, doesn't matter, mom, dad, whoever it is. What do you think happened? Or just looking at them as a human, what do you think wasn't there for them? Or what do you think, I mean, maybe they grew up during World War II, or I don't know, they never came out of a war situation and got any support to transition from being a soldier that had to be in all these difficult circumstances to, well, how do I be a good dad and how do I be a good husband? So I look for where that disruption is, and then if they can identify it for the parent, then I do a whole working on, well, let's see what your parent needed, and let's see what happens in you as you experience possibly your parent having their needs met. And that's surprisingly productive in mitigating some of the wounding that came down from a parent, because that people make a really big shift in a relatively short period of time. So that's another whole topic, but it's another way to help healing happen, even generationally.
Yeah, I mean, because you would immediately allow for grace for your parent, and I think that separates who they are from what they did.
Exactly. And it
Mhm.
opens up, I mean, I had one guy that said to me, I have been working on this for 30 years, and I know not, he was in my class, so he knew my context. I was teaching intergenerational trauma, but he said, I've been working on this for 30 days, and my father was so cruel. I felt like it was a life and death experience every time I went home. I didn't know if I was going to survive being home. So pretty brutal, right? And he, Detroit and the whole, he just, this really brutal upbringing. And he goes, and my dad's dying now, and I don't have anything to do with him. I'm not going to talk. I don't care. I just, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. And I'm like, well, okay. Because he was asking the question, can you work on this intergenerational stuff if the parent's still alive? I said, well, of course you can. And I said, if you want, I can do a mini working with you and we'll just see where it goes. I have no idea where it's going to go. I said, same thing. What do you think happened to your dad that he was so incredibly cruel? And he said, well, he just never had anybody that was there for him. He never had anybody he had a really violent father, and he never had anybody that cared about him or understood him. And I said, well, if we just focus on your dad for a minute, do you know of anybody in his life that he could hear that they could be there for him, or that he could take it in, or he could even consider that somebody was there for him and understood him a little bit? And he goes, well, yeah, there was this guy that was older than him that he really looked up to. And he was in our family so much, we called him Uncle, but he was a friend of my dad's. So I said, okay, so I'm going to call him Uncle Friend. So if you bring Uncle Friend into the picture for your father, we're focusing on your father now, and he goes, oh yeah, but my dad's going like this. My dad wants to write him up. I'm like, well, okay, your dad's understandably, he doesn't know what to do with it. It's like, just in your mind, just let them hang out. Like, your Uncle Friend is maybe not saying anything. Maybe he's saying one or two words. Maybe he's touching your dad's forearm. Maybe he's just present saying, I'm here, but not even doing anything. So we hang out for, a few minutes, and he goes, oh, it's really weird. I see my dad soften. And I'm like, oh, interesting. And he goes, and he's smiling. I think I saw my dad smile twice in my entire life. This is really weird. I don't know this person. I said, well, you don't know your dad with support. You know your dad without support. So this is your dad with support. And he goes, yeah, he's smiling and he's taking in this support. He goes, but what's really weird is my grandmother, my father's mother, is showed up. I go, okay. And she was born in a war zone and she wasn't nurturing at all, but she's wanting to mother him. Like, she's already dead. She's wanting to mother him. I'm like, well, that's cool. How is it for your father to receive mothering, which he didn't have when he was little? And he goes, well, that's not even the focus right now. It's my grandmother's healing because she really wants to be nurturing and to be a good mom, but she never did it in real life. He's healing her own mothering nature is healing. I'm like, well, that's really amazing. And so he goes, yeah, because I can really see her. She's just transforming into this nurturing mom. And so then later on, well, how's your dad receiving that? Well, he said, I've always resented these people that talk about having healthy families. I always resented them because I thought I have no idea what that is. And he said, but now I'm starting to feel like I have a healthy family. And I'm like going, whoa. And he goes, or at least I know what it is. I can feel it. I can feel my grandmother being nurturing, my father taking it in, my father being kinder, not kind, but kinder. He points out. And I'm starting to feel like, wow, I have a dad who's more accessible. And he said, but I still don't know if I want to talk to him, even though he's dying. I'm like, well, whatever you do, I mean, it's up to you. Whatever you do is fine. I said, but I think you and he are going to have an easier time with his passing from the work you just did. Well, he was in a class with me, so I got to talk to him a week later. And he said, well, it was my sister's birthday, who's been estranged from me for 6 months to a year. She never picks up my calls. She just cut me off because that's what we do in our family. And I called her on her birthday. We did the session on Thursday. I called her on Sunday. She answered the phone. I'm like, whoa. And he said, yeah. And we talked for 2 hours about my dad, about our relationship. We had this connection. It was like unbelievable. And I said, well, how's that impacting you? He goes, it's like otherworldly. I can't even explain how different this is. So it's like it goes all directions when you heal generationally. And he said, I'm not promising anything. He's very clear to be kind of stern. I said, okay. He said, but I'm kind of feeling like I might want to reach out to my dad. I said, cool. I said, yeah, whatever you do is fine, But you see, that was 20 minutes and the impact that had. And I didn't even say anything about his grandmother. I mean, it just starts opening doors that you can't even. And I'm just trying to ask intelligent questions. All of this is happening in the client. The client is generating all of this. I'm just asking a few prompt questions. I'm not directing anything. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm not saying this is good, this is bad. I'm just being there and inviting some curiosity to their dynamics. And I've countless examples of how people move sometimes from hate to love or sexual abuse to love in a relatively short period of time. So I'm excited about this way of working. Also, this is kind of off what we were talking about, but it's something that I've been doing lately. That's new. The
You
last
should be excited. I mean, that is huge. 20 minutes and all of that happened? And you see that over and over and
To
over?
be fair, he was in a class with me, so he knew what I was talking about, so I
Oh,
didn't have to go into all the explaining. But still, he wasn't
yeah,
expecting it.
still.
He goes, I've been working on
Still.
this for 30 years, nothing's going to change. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Well, let's just play. Let's see what happens, I'm just, but a lot can happen in a short period of time. I mean, that's what I'm not trying to emphasize the shortness. I'm trying to emphasize that we have this inherent capacity to heal in all of us. All human beings have it. And if we're willing to be a little vulnerable and maybe a little uncomfortable but a little bit curious and allow some of that healing to come through, very powerful things can happen. We don't have to stay in suffering. I mean, suffering is a natural part of the human journey, but we can reduce unnecessary suffering by repeating patterns or just continuing to be at the effect of our histories in a major way. And, with the right support, I think we really do need good, in my world, it would be attachment and trauma informed support can be really, really powerful. But we can do this with our friends. I mean, we can do it as a human being in the world. We can present secure attachment even when people are behaving poorly. That's one of my personal challenges, is that I believe in reconciliation so much, is even when people are kind of hateful towards me, I don't go there. I mean, I go, okay, let's see what if maybe time has to pass, but I will try to move. I mean, I don't always do it perfectly. I mean, I screw up all the time too, but I will try to look for opportunities. I mean, I did that with my mother. That's one of the greatest accomplishments of my life, because my mother was really, really difficult. And I mean, wow. I mean, we don't need to go into all that. She was also a pretty cool person, but she was really, really difficult. And I felt like we ended in a very loving relationship by the time she passed. And that's like a major life accomplishment for me, that I
Mm.
refused to just become embittered and, all that, which is easy to do when somebody's being that mean. But, it's like I'm trying to see how powerful reconciliation is. I just think it's important. And you have to be up for doing it. It's not always the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, it's got to be so fulfilling to help people get to security. And I think for 30 plus years that you've been doing it, you've had to have some really, really great moments. Let me ask you this. With all the work that you're doing to help others, what is it that you want people to know most?
I want people to know that healing is possible and that our basic nature is love. And that when we heal a disruption, we come back to this basic nature. Our loving nature is our nature. And a lot of things can interrupt that. A lot of things can wound that. A lot of things can fracture that. We can disconnect from that. But when we do, that healing is possible and that we can find our true nature, that it is there waiting for us if it's not obvious already. And if you like, when I do sessions with people, they might start pretty contracted and maybe pretty uncomfortable about something, but by the end of the session they're like just emanating light. There's like light in their eyes, there's light coming, so I know that they're moving. It's a green light. They're moving in a direction that they're finding themselves, and you are worth finding. You're valuable.
Mhm.
You are incredibly precious and have so many capacities and so much creativity and so much love to share. And I just feel like, I guess the most important thing for me personally, is to like learn about love, emanate love, be able to receive love, which was very challenging for me in the beginning. Not just in a relational context, but just in how I see the world, even when things look pretty difficult, which is not hard to find. Um, I'm trying to orient in a certain way as much as I can. And I think I see the power of that, not just about me, but just in the world, when we can find that kind of inner sanctuary, but also, you know, presence, something that opens up possibilities and tries to invite other people's true nature out, like to make space and be receptive and also support that essential self to take the front seat instead of our ego defensive self that we naturally have as humans.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much for this. Like, I've so enjoyed this conversation, listening to you, hearing your story, your journey, your message, what you offer. It's just incredible, and I'm just so grateful.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been a real privilege to be here. And it's a privilege to be on anybody's human journey with them. So I've had the luxury of doing that with many people. So I
Mhm.
thank my clients and thank my mentors and my teachers. And thank you for inviting me. This has been really a delight.
If somebody wants to find you online or on social media, where can they find you?
They can find me on traumasolutions.com or dianepooleheller.com. It goes to the same website. That's probably the best thing. And if you take the attachment quiz, that'll kind of automatically put you on our mailing list. If you want to be on our mailing list, you can always hit unsubscribe if you don't want to. But we try to put out really high quality, useful uh, experiences for people. And I also believe in doing demos, so you see the work in action. So we very frequently, every month or so, have free webinars that we do, and you're welcome to join those. It doesn't mean you have to join anything else. I mean, but we try to give out really high quality information, and that's practical. I'm big in practical. Like, can you use it when you get off a call? That's the way I think about things. So, and usually when people understand what the dynamics are, they can engage in these practices. They're not impossible, they're not mysterious even. They make a lot of sense. So we have a ton of those practical, experiential attachment healing or trauma resolving kinds of things. So I hope that that's useful for people. So that's the main thing, I think. And we are on social media. I don't have that information at my fingertips on how to access that, but I think you can find it probably through our website. Yeah.
I'll make sure it's in the show notes. And
Okay.
then also, where can people find your books?
Oh, my book. Let's see. This one, Power of Attachment, is you can find. It's going to look funny. Is on Amazon, or you can order it through Sounds True, who published it. I also have a CD set. The people do CDs anymore, but it's not. I think you can get the electronic version too. It's called Healing Your Attachment Wounds. So it's, if you prefer to listen on an audio versus read, there's that way to do it. A lot of people like that too. And yeah, so you can find them on Amazon or on it Sounds True, who published them. And I also have a book called Crash Course on high impact shock trauma, how to work that. It's called Crash Course, and that was published by North Atlantic Books. But again, I think you can find that on Amazon, because you get everything on Amazon. It's amazing.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, Dr. Heller, thank you so much for this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for how you do it.
Well, thank you back at you. And I'm so glad you're putting all this information out for everyone. It's really beautiful. Thanks for having me.